Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Shannon's Shelf. I am Shannon, and today I'm going to talk about 10 authors that I need to read. And I'm a little bit ashamed of this. In fact, there's a long list of authors already that I have read, perhaps one or two things by, that I definitely need to read more of. Maybe I'll do a video on that eventually. I don't know. But I'm going to try to hopefully remedy this list to a big degree, maybe by the end of 2025. That would be great if I could actually read something by all 10 of these authors I'm going to go over. Not sure that's going to happen. Some of these I am prioritizing more than others, and this will be in no particular order though. But this has been like I guess maybe a revival year for me. I've actually been reading a lot more than I had. In 2023 was probably the worst year ever for me reading. But even a couple years preceding that, I just was kind of reading less and less. And I think I got burnt out because I was reading so much nonfiction. And this year, in many ways, I still have read a fair amount of nonfiction, but I started reading fantasy and more fiction again, which I really enjoy. And I feel like it keeps my interest and desire to read alive, which is a good thing to have. I talked about some books I want to read next year in the end of year tag that just came out a couple days ago before this one. If you're interested in that, go ahead and watch that. I talk about some more things in detail, some of my plans that I have. But today I'm just going to talk about 10 authors that I have not read ever. And you can criticize me in the comments about that. And if these are authors you have read, am going to invite you to let me know where a good place to start is. Some of these I have specific series in mind, of course, but some of them have written a lot, and there might be a place that you think is best for me to start. Perhaps not the big series that I want to read. And speaking of big series, Robert Jordan is one of them. I have never read Robert Jordan. I know he's kind of a huge name. I remember my neighbor when I lived in Arizona before. I still live in Arizona, but when I lived in Arizona, like at the end of high school and stuff, he loved The Wheel of Time. Might need to reach out to him and see how he's doing. But it's so intimidating. So this is one I'm not sure I'm gonna get to next year. This is one I could see myself maybe starting within a couple of years. But I need to read The Wheel of Time. I need to read some Robert Jordan. I feel like, can I even say I'm a fantasy fan or what have you if I haven't read The Wheel of Time? Yes, because I've done it. I've done that, but maybe not the biggest fan. Certainly not the most read fan. Definitely keep that in mind, and you will realize how unread I am when it comes to this list. And this list does also kind of, you know, give you a good idea of my interests. Lots of these are pretty big names. Not all of them are fantasy, and most of them are more on the classical side. And I have read a lot of great authors this year. I just read Gene Wolfe for the first time, so he's not on this list. And I feel like, man, I was a fool for putting it off for so long, and I think that might be the case for lots of these other ones. So, yeah, but Robert Dorn is the first one. Another one I have not read is Frank Herbert. I have never read Dune. My wife has read Dune. I have a copy of Dune, not on me. It's in storage, which I'll get to my storage stuff soon, hopefully. And it's a nice, lovely, like collectible copy of Dune. My hope is to maybe read Dune and then the next two books. My little brother is a big fan, and I know it's my understanding that those three books are like the best ones, and after that it can maybe get a bit shaky. I'm not exactly sure, but I definitely need to read some Frank Herbert because I never have. I haven't read that much sci-fi generally speaking anymore. Anyway, I read a lot more fantasy, but I hope to read more sci-fi in 2025. Frank Herbert is a good one to read, per my understanding. And then this one's a little bit different than the first two, but someone I also definitely need to read more of is Knut Hamsun. So Knut Hamsun, he's kind of a controversial figure, like lots of historical figures can be. He got the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1920, and there are three books that are particularly important of his that I think I should read. Besides Hunger, that is Growth of the Soil and Pan. He was a Hitler apologist and like a fan of Hitler and stuff, which is really odd. He's a Norwegian author himself, and I just think that's crazy to say. I mean, I know that, history makes everything obvious in many ways, right? Looking back, but I still really want to read Knut Hamsun. He's not one I've been aware of for too long. In fact, it might have been less than a year since I really even knew he existed. But I think I would enjoy those three books that I mentioned. So I'm hoping to read some Knut Hamsun. Hopefully I'm saying that right anyway. But I'm hoping to read some of his at some point, perhaps by the end of 2025. Another one that I need to read, in fact, I'm going to go over two that I need to read that are mostly I'm acquainted with, or I know who they are, I have an idea of who they are because of my brother, my twin brother, who has a channel as well. That is Clark Ashton Smith, and I know he's a poet, but he also had other stories. And my brother's super fond of Clark Ashton Smith. He's kind of the horror, like weird stuff, I believe, and I think I would enjoy some of his stuff, but I've never read any of his stuff, so I definitely need to remedy that. And I do like poetry. I don't really have any other poets per se, and some of these authors did write poetry, but not exclusively. I don't know if you guys can hear the attack helicopters going over my house. I live near a Marine base. But, and like all the land south of where I live, up into the Mexican border, is just Marine property or whatever. It's federal land, is where they like practice or what have you. But besides that, the other one besides Clark Ashton Smith that is pretty much I'm aware of through my brother is Fritz Leiber. Fritz Leiber is supposed to be, I guess, some sort of behemoth when it comes to sword and sorcery. And sword and sorcery is something I've not read a lot of. Actually, I've read someone who's not on this list because I read my first book by him ever this year, only a couple months ago, was Michael Moorcock, who's supposed to be one of those big figures in sword and sorcery. And I wasn't blown away necessarily. I think I need to read more Moorcock. But Fritz Leiber is someone I definitely need to read more of. My brother seems to be a very big fan of him. And so I should make that happen. Hopefully, I'll make that happen relatively soon. What I find with lots of sword and sorcery stuff too is they're not necessarily hard reads. They're relatively short, quick, easy to read, page turners, and that is something that I can definitely appreciate from time to time at the very least. Another one that I need to read that is perhaps the most present, and that isn't, has passed away or super old or what have you, is I need to read some John Gwynne. Now, John Gwynne is someone that I haven't been super acquainted with for too long. I know about the Brothers Grimm. The Brothers Gwynne on YouTube. I don't really watch much of their stuff. I've seen some of it here or there. I'm mostly aware of John Gwynne through Sam from Sam Not So Wise. And although I'm not necessarily sure John Gwynne is gonna knock my socks off, sounds very enjoyable at least, which is fine. I think it's good to read for enjoyment a lot, if not maybe the majority of the time. And he may surprise me anyway, right? I think that both the Faithful and the Fallen and the Bloodsworn stuff, I'm not sure where to start. Maybe Faithful and Fallen. I think that's the older series. You'll have to pardon my ignorance, I suppose. But John Gwynne, that's someone that is certainly a contemporary author that writes some interesting stuff. He seems to be more in line with some Scott Oden stuff that I read this year, which is my first time reading Scott Oden, that I relatively enjoyed. And I think John Gwynne writes similarly Norse-inspired things, but they're rather than like maybe progression fantasy, they seem to be more epic fantasy. And being a Viking reenactor is pretty cool too. I have a buddy over in Massachusetts that's actually just joined like a Viking reenactment group, and I think that's pretty neat. I don't know if there's any near me. I haven't really looked. I don't know if I have the time to do such a thing, but that does sound kind of fun. So we've gone through 6. So number 7. This is mostly not really at the behest of my wife, but she's a big fan, and I feel like I should have read him by this point, and that is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I don't know how I've gotten away with never reading any Sherlock or stuff like that. This year I've read more fantasy. This year I've read more mystery than I've ever had before, but I still have not read Sherlock. I own some of it because my wife owns some, so I feel like I should read some of that. I'm not sure I'm gonna love it too much, but I definitely feel like I need to read. I need to read some. Like, come on. And then another author who's also considered kind of, I guess, a classical author at this point, although a little bit later than lots of classical authors, is Virginia Woolf. I've never read Virginia Woolf. She's kind of been on my radar for years, and I've been interested in reading her stuff for, just as long as she's been on my radar, but it just hasn't happened for some reason. But stuff like To the Lighthouse or Mrs. Dalloway all sound very interesting to me. I think I would enjoy them. So hopefully I'll figure that out at some point. Hopefully soon, that is. Someone else that I need to read that I guess does mystery as well, but I think he's more famous for mystery. Sorry, not mystery, for the sci-fi and the fantasy is Jack Vance. I know that his Lyonesse trilogy is supposed to be pretty good. I have that on my list. That's something I'm kind of hoping to find at a used bookstore as I go to different bookstores in different states uh, for that series. So I'm hoping to read Jack Vance relatively soon. I've heard great things about him. I mean, my brother definitely has read Jack Vance, but I know T has read Jack Vance as well, and I think he would recommend Jack Vance. Lyonesse trilogy is kind of where I have my eyes sit currently, but I know he wrote a lot more than that. I'm not sure what else I should try to prioritize. At this point, I kind of just want to read something by him, and I guess I'm not too picky. I actually had a copy of a Jack Vance book because I bought it to read it with my brother and my twin brother and our older brother, and I ended up really not reading it, and I don't think I have the copy anymore. I must have gotten rid of it, which is odd. I don't usually get rid of books. I do sometimes when I'm moving, so that's probably what happened. But oops. And then the last one that I need to read, and somehow I only became acquainted with this guy's name recently, is Chinua Achebe. So not only do I think it's perhaps good for me to branch out more, and this is a African author, a Nigerian author. I don't think I've ever read a Nigerian author. I lived in Ghana for a bit, and I feel like although Nigeria and Ghana don't border each other, I lived with a couple of Nigerians. They were great guys, still are great guys, and there seemed to be a bit more fraternity between Ghanaians and Nigerians as opposed to lots of the other countries Ghana actually bordered, and I think that was largely because they both speak English, while every country that borders Ghana speaks French. So there's not as great sense of camaraderie. I felt like the Ghanaians, when I lived there at least, were more easily communicating, especially since they spoke English with the Liberians and Sierra Leoneans. Is that what they're called? But also especially Nigerians. And Nigeria is huge, a huge country. The population is booming. I've heard great things about Nigeria. The Nigerian friends I have love their country, of course, despite it having problems. I mean, every country has problems, of course. But Chinua Achebe, he is most famous for Things Fall Apart, which is actually the first book in a trilogy, and I've not read any of them. I would love to. That's something I think I will definitely be trying to read by sometime in 2025. But hopefully I read all of them by the end of 2025 to some degree. But that's my list of 10. Sorry I wasn't really going safe. Number 1, number 2, or whatever. I just kind of read all them off there, didn't I? I hope that's okay, and I hope you'll forgive me. If not, uh, sorry. But please feel free to like and subscribe, comment. Definitely let me know which of these you think I should prioritize, what I should read of all these authors, as far as recommendations, where perhaps a good place to start is. I know I mentioned where I'm thinking about starting for some of them, but not all of them necessarily. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I guess if you want to hold me to my word, then you can subscribe and continue to harass me on future videos. That's cool too. Uh, I'm not sure what kind of encouragement I need the most. You could try insulting me, but you could try also gently prodding me. We'll see which one works, and we can use this as an experiment, perhaps. But either way, I've been Shannon, and hopefully I won't have to be ashamed of not reading these authors sometime soon. And hopefully it's worth it. I think that all 10 of these won't disappoint me. At least not too much. If they do, somehow. But either way, I've been Shannon, and I will see you guys next time. Please have a good one. Adios.